So,
sorry, Jeff, keep going.
No, that was all. Sorry.
Just survive.
Neil?
I'd like to spend more time with Steve Varsano in 2021 than I did in 2020.
And you're also giving up shaving.
I'm post-pandemic. Once I get the vaccine, I'll shave and I'll cut my hair.
Jay, what's yours?
Hug my grandkids and my kids. Get out from this box.
It's a great one from Renee, who's getting her PPL this year. Right, Jay, you're up. What's your prediction for 2021?
I think 2021 is going to be a balanced, good year. I think that we came out of 2020 with a huge frenzy. It was actually one of our very best years, transaction-wise. And I'm not seeing it slow down in 2021 other than there's no magic date to close by month end or year end. So I'm feeling very good about where we are. I would like to see more of the corporate world come back, although we had an opportunity to make a proposal to a corporation about acquiring. That was lovely. That segment had retreated a good bit in 2020. Maybe it was the optics, maybe it was the fact they couldn't go anywhere. But it would be nice to get that demand from that segment back up.
Okay, and first quarter, we've got lockdowns all over the world. Do you think it's going to be quiet?
We're not starting that way. We've got a plane in pre-buy. We're making an offer on another plane today. We've picked up a couple of nice listings. And by the way, it usually is quiet in January because people are sort of thinking about their last year, re-strategizing for the next year. But we've got more activity right now, real activity, than we typically have in January.
So about 3 minutes ago, I got an email offering me a nice 2020 Phenom 300E from you, Jay. Are you seeing it smaller aircraft or larger aircraft?
Well, Steve and I can tell you that we just finished a large aircraft together, and it's really all over the board. I'm not seeing, the plane I've got in pre-buy right now is a Gulfstream 450. We've closed several smaller ones, Challenger 300s, Hawker 800 XPs, but then also in December, a couple of 550s, 650. So it's really a mix.
And last year you had a great year. We saw the figures from IATA were pretty impressive. Is there any worry about a shortage of inventory? Just not enough people wanting to sell this year?
Sandra, my business partner and CFO and wife, would come into my office regularly and say, we need more inventory. What are we going to do? Because really there was not, during the pandemic, there was not a rush, at least for us, to see people trying to divest themselves of equipment. And yet there was, absent the corporate buzz, with the first-time buyers and high-net-worth individuals coming in, they were absorbing a good bit of the inventory, and certainly the best first. But it never got to a place, how do you measure supply and demand, and you measure in what it'll do to pricing. I never saw any place where prices were going to start to go up because there was more demand than there was supply. And I'm seeing, like I said, we've added a couple of really nice airplanes since the first of the year. So, but in a normal way, not in a frenzied way. So I think we're going to have a good balance this year.
And last year, it was so much driven by US buyers. Are you seeing the same thing happening again this year, or are you optimistic about the rest of the world?
Well, if I get to be optimistic about the rest of the world, it means I can start to travel around the rest of the world. So I'm going to certainly be optimistic. But I'm still seeing the majority of our business being North America and specifically United States business.
So you famously talk about getting into the fence business and selling fences. We saw a lot of people saw 2020 as the year to get into business jet. They got off the fence. Do you think, due to lockdowns and just obvious reasons, do you think there's still people who've been sitting on the fence all through 2020? Are there still new buyers come out in 2021?
I think people make a career out of fence sitting in some cases. And so they're going to be on the fence anyway. They're going to find some reason to stay on the fence. But those aren't typically the people that are in the arena. The people that are in the arena are driven, they're passionate, they're focused. And, I'm sure that Steve saw the same thing. Our number of first-time buyers, as I said, last March, April, even May, I looked at it as idle conversation that people would call and say, I'm never going to get on a commercial airliner again. And then I thought probably the next day they called their yacht broker or their realtor. But starting in June, these calls went beyond idle conversation and into actual transactions with a number that I had not seen. These were really not the people sitting on the fence. These were new people. And I always say that when you get first-time buyers, our whole industry gets a shot in the arm. Hangars get rented, pilots get hired, insurance policies get sold, maintenance facilities get booked up for prebuys and modernization. So it's a terrific phenomenon, a very positive phenomenon that occurs for our whole industry and all the participants, whether it's engine participants with JSSI. So many good things start to happen, and I know that happened for all the clients that we had come in that were first-time buyers, and I think that it's a big multiple that you could multiply that against. I know the maintenance facilities were full, modernization facilities were full, harder to find hangar space. So I think that there are people that are always going to be on the fence, but I think right now there's a big pool in the arena.
So, Jay, and we'll come back to you in a minute, but what's your big prediction for 2021? What do you think could happen? No one will hold this to you.
Well, you could certainly look at headwinds, and you could see the divisiveness and the disruption that's going on for us here in the United States, and you could wonder how that could hold in and hold over. You might even look at that as a tailwind and say that could be a driver for more people to buy planes, be sure they've got the freedom to get up and get out and travel. But if I had the big prediction for 2021, I would say that it's going to center around the word balance and create a balanced environment for us where residual loss rates will start to balance out, supply and demand will be well balanced, clients coming into the market will be well balanced with clients leaving the market. So balance is the word I'm going to use for 2021.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jay. We'll come back to you if that's okay.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Neil, I was going to go, Jay was the smartest. I was then going to go to Steve, who hasn't got a tie, but we'll jump to you in Chicago. What are your thoughts on the year?
I think the first half of the year is going to look much like the second half of 2020. I obviously view the world through the prism of flight hours, and what we've seen in 2020 is our flight hours were off about 30% from 19. I think we're going to see, that trend probably continue for the first half of this year. But I do believe as the vaccine rollout continues and people are getting more and more comfortable, people start going back into the office, I think the second half of the year can really start to look more like the numbers we were seeing in 2019. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand, particularly on the business side, obviously. So maybe we'll have a CJI event some point the second half of the year. And I just think that we're going to see sort of that pent-up business demand unleashed in the second half of 2021. With that said, it is just there's so much uncertainty in the world today, and particularly in the biggest business aviation market in the U.S. right now, with with the events of the last couple of weeks here, with the new administration coming in, with you having a across the board sweep for the Democratic Party. There's a lot of dynamics that we just don't know how they're going to play out. So there's certainly some uncertainty, but I tend to be optimistic as the year goes on. Things are going to continue to look up.
And do you think it's just simply a matter of vaccines to get corporates traveling again?
Well, I think that's certainly a piece of it, and certainly I think there's a big difference between sort of the C-suite traveling again and your other employees who are typically flying through the airlines, right? So I do their corporate jets, but I think the way business is done is going to be transformed for the foreseeable future. I know with for us, for example, where we have 120 people in our headquarters office in Chicago every day, that's changing. Okay, I think we're going to have a case where probably 30% of those people come back to the office on a day-to-day basis, and then we're going to have sort of collaborative sessions a couple of times a week based on what organization and what team you're on within the business. So I think there's just going to be a transformation with how we look at going back to work, going back to the office.
Do you think there's going to be a business travel transformation in the same way, that we're going to have people, lower level? You talk about the C-suite traveling. Do you think we're going to see lower levels being told to Zoom?
Yeah, I do. I think there's going to be, I think what the last year has demonstrated is that you can be extremely productive and efficient leveraging technology to work together. Now, it's never, of course, going to completely replace the need for direct human interaction and sitting across the table from one another, but I don't think it's going to come back to the levels that we've seen historically. Right? We've seen that this can work, and so there will continue to be need for it, of course, but I don't think it's going to come back to the levels that we've seen.
Do you, people tend to put aircraft on programs or engines on programs when there's a transaction. So we've seen, Jay's talked about the pre-owned market. What's your thought about new aircraft deliveries?
Well, from a program perspective, I think you're going to continue to see, engine programs becoming the standard on virtually all new aircraft deliveries, regardless if the aircraft is financed or not. There's just too much value in the engine program. So I think we'll see that trend continue, obviously, which really became the standard following the last major market disruption in 2008.
And what's your big crazy prediction for 2021?
That Steve Versano is never going back to wearing ties.
Okay, that's bold. Right, we'll come back to you in a second, Neil. Also, please feel free to ask questions. You can come up and ask a mic. So we've heard about pre-owned aircraft. We've heard about flight hours and maintenance. Jeff, charter, thoughts?
If you'd asked me towards the end of the year, so November, it was a pretty bleak sort of lockdowns and people weren't really traveling. And then from December, very surprisingly, it picked up in a lot of the long range flying. So December was very strong. January started very, very strong as well. Half the people were in the Maldives, the other half were in Dubai. And that's where everybody went to because it was easy to get to. And what we found with clients as well is that if they were able to go on the airlines and then interline onto a jet, that's what they were doing. So we had some customers that were sort of meant to go out to St. Lucia on British Airways. All of a sudden, British Airways cancelled the flight. They took a Global out of Zurich. Or customers would come down to Johannesburg on the Swiss flight, jump on the jet, and then do the tours of their mines and facilities and so forth in Africa. We also had some of our clients who looked at purchase. One client did purchase an aircraft and is putting it onto AOC. They're in the mining world, and it was the only way now in Africa that they can get around. And another one's putting it on an AOC, Marathon in Greece, and took the aircraft private because they believe as well that it's going to keep going. And it's finding that combination at the moment. I do feel positive. particularly for January. Obviously, I believe February will be a little bit of a tougher month, particularly here in Switzerland. We've just had new lockdown measures announced about an hour ago. And from March, people are going to feel quite pent up. There's Easter coming up, vaccines are rolling out. And of course, new customers have come in, and those have been referrals from other customers, but it's our existing client base that tends to keep flying, and we find them flying more and further. And yeah, I feel pretty confident.
And what's your lockdown now? What are the rules you've got now?
Well, now we no more than 5 people are allowed to be together. They're closing non-essential stores. Thank God the schools are going to stay open. I think that drives me back to my prediction or my New Year's resolution of wine. But Switzerland was quite lucky in the first instance. But of course, we're having anywhere between 5,000 to 8,000 cases a day with a population of 8 million people. The numbers are quite high. So, but the borders remain open, and I think that's going to be a key differentiator. People are still going to travel now if they can, and with the quarantine periods coming down, in some of the cases down to 5 days, people are willing to make that sacrifice to travel. What we've also found is the US, so a lot of our clients have got B1, B2 visas. They've been able to get the business visas now, or exemptions from the embassies that allow them to travel under that B1, B2. And of course, as everybody rightly knows, that traffic across the Atlantic is absolutely key. And we're seeing that come back quite strongly now because of these special visas or exemptions.
Is it getting any easier?
It was. If you were going to Dubai or the Maldives, you just needed to get parking. No, actually, it's not too bad. I think the general panic is gone now, and so here in Switzerland, as an example, the government has issued the restriction today, but they'll only come into effect on Monday. Unlike the UK, who on Monday announced that 4 a.m. on Tuesday you'd have to quarantine if you arrived from Dubai, and it's about just staying on top of those things. And people expect it now. I think that just that general panic is gone. It's about having our team be proactive and watching what's going on. And I must say, so far, so good.
And is it easy to get tests, and have you had anyone fail yet?
Not that we know of. I mean, they could always PDF edit the results if they wanted to, really. Some countries are asking them for arrival. I myself traveled to Dubai in December, and you just get your PCR test. They check it when you come in, and they welcome you with open arms. And that makes it a lot easier, and people are able to go tourism or business.
And did you discover all the potential? Did you and your colleagues in the charter industry, did you discover everyone who you think was going to fly on jets last year, or are there still people out there?
I think there's still people out there, and I looked at a friend of mine. Her mother lives in Monte Carlo, needs to go back to Tel Aviv, and called me up on Monday and said, the only way for mom to get back now is, Nice, Zurich, 6 hours in Zurich, and then take the Swiss flight to Tel Aviv. Well, I don't know if anybody's been in the Zurich airport recently, but nothing's open except the Burger King. And I just don't imagine, these principals sitting in an airport for 6 hours. And so there are still new customers coming in. There are referrals. Yes, our business suffered last year, and I think the number of about 30% is about right. But our customer base did grow, and that was quite organic because the best marketing that you can ever have is word of mouth, and that's been strong.
And when we talk about traffic being down 30%, one of the things we didn't see last year. A lot of operators were struggling in 2019. One of the things we didn't see last year is many operators going out of business. You haven't seen that, have you?
No, we haven't. I mean, naturally, you're a bit more cautious these days with, and Steve and Vassan and I were just discussing it earlier. I mean, I say cash is king, and he's right. It's liquidity is king. Obviously, if you're not prepaying huge amounts out upfront. We also became members of Avinode's Paynode service as well, so we can pay instantly amongst each other, and we've got some escrow and so forth. And so it's just about being very cautious. And with my wife as the CFO, I'm extra cautious.
Jay can tell you about that as well. Okay, thanks. That's brilliant. What's your big prediction?
2018. I would like to believe strongly that 2019 2018, 2019 were pretty good years for us. I would like to go back to that, and if we're not, we finish with that balanced view that Jay messaged, then I'm very happy with that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jeff. We'll come back to you, Zach. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Al. You?
So, you've heard from Neil, Jeff, and Jay. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think there's a hybrid of what Neil and Jay was saying. I think there's a big disconnect in hours flown and airplanes being bought and sold today. It's amazing that people are flying less, but aircraft sales are up. So you might see an indicator where people are flying less, so you wouldn't buy airplanes. But for some reason, I'm baffled that the market is pretty strong. I agree also, with Jay. I mean, pretty much last year was saved by the fourth quarter. And I'm seeing a continuation, and now in January of still a pipeline that's full and continuing to be more deals coming on the table for us. But quite frankly, I'm a little shocked because even though two of the big pluses for our industry, which is low fuel sales and low interest rates, will remain that way for sure through the year and for foreseeable future. The unknowns are, the government. You got Brexit here in England, and you can start seeing a few other countries in Europe trying to pull away. You have the elections. I know last year we talked about, the COVID thing in China, but quite frankly, I don't want to say it, but I think there are some rumblings right now, again, from the Chinese and Washington that they have, in a very, very near future, there's going to be some outlandish accusations made about how this whole thing started, and there's going to be a huge global, act or force against China and what happened. And I think that's going to have some big kind of a global impact on not on airplane sales, but in, again, just the economies around the world. In the Middle East, I think you're going to see a plus, a positive move there, because with all the countries, making friends now in Israel and people just, trying to find other ways besides oil sales to develop tourism and other things and development. I think you're going to start seeing more activity in the Middle East. But the U.S. election is, who knows? That's a real guess. I think you're going to see a stock market pop in the next few months. I think it's just way, overblown. So, there are some pluses that, should be good for us, but there's so, again, anybody who can make a prediction in the forget about the next 10 years or the next year. I'm talking the next 3 to 9 months would be just rolling the dice. So, I'm optimistic for this quarter, but I'm not sure second, third quarter, I'm not so optimistic.
Just to check, when you say there's huge uncertainty with the US election, are you contesting the result or saying about the new administration?
I'm saying that I don't know. None of us really know what President Harris is really going to do, and that's the unknown. If there's any kind of because they brought a lot of people in from the Obama administration, and as you know, Obama's administration was not the friendliest group for the corporate aviation world. So that's just the question of will we be able to keep that up, or it's an unknown what's going to happen with Harris, and we just don't know. And I think more people are going to listen to what she says than what Joe Biden's going to say, because she is going to be, he's not going to miss the whole term, and she's going to take over and run for the next 2 terms.
Well, Steve, what I would add to that, I think what the real risk is when you have a Democratic House and Senate, there's going to be a lot more pressure from the left wing of the Democratic Party to pull Joe Biden further to the left than he probably, would otherwise want to do. So I think that's where you're going to see some of the pressure. Now, I don't know what that means or what the implications of that are for the business aviation industry. That's still, we'll have time will tell.
Yeah, but left is normally not positive for our industry.
We're correct. Yeah.
Jay, do you want to add anything on that?
Well, I think that a lot of what everybody has said is correct. I think that the incoming administration, frankly, has a lot on its plate, and business aviation is probably not right up there. Even taxes probably aren't right up there right now. I think that there's a lot of COVID issues, there's a lot of other economic issues. So I think that I really believe that this year is not going to be burdened with aviation-minded or lack of aviation-minded people trying to nip at our heels of our industry. That may come in the next several years, but I think that there's a lot that the new administration and everybody that's coming in with it are going to be dealing with.
Steve, what's your big prediction for the year?
No, like I said, I think there's going to be rumbling about the China trade and economic war because of reacting to everybody attacking them of them causing COVID. And I do think that there's going to be a stock market pop, and that those are two negatives. But again, like I said, there's a disconnect, and people are still out there buying airplanes because nobody can fly commercial comfortably anymore. And so that's driving more people and more new people into the market. And we have right now a brand new buyer, and we're deciding if he's going to buy a 900 Falcon or a G450. He's tossing, and that's a first time buyer. So we're seeing these kind of guys come out, and I think that's going to continue because of whatever 40, 50, 60% of the airlines not flying, and you can't get from here to there without a connection now. So I do think that is a plus.
Okay, so Jean Robert, who at Airbus, Johnny Christmas, was saying he was looking forward to hearing your predictions, and now you've got, but I think now he's depressed at your down one. Okay, we've got loads of questions.
Good thing he moved back to France.
Sorry?
Good thing he moved back to France.
Okay, Steve, question from you, from Sharon McKenna, Vice President, Aircraft Risk and Aircraft Management at RVI Group, the residual value insurers. What do you think will be manufacturers' strategy on production rates for 21 and 22? Are there buyers, or will we see price cutting?
Well, I don't think you're going to see so much price cutting. They have to keep their pricing up, and quite frankly, it's hard to find a less than 5-year-old airplane for sale in a lot of the markets. That is the thinnest inventory, of any pre-owned airplanes available. So there is a point where people don't want a used airplane to be so many years old, and it could be 3 years old, it could be 9 years old. Everybody's different, but the manufacturers, will be able to, remain in a positive mode because they will still find those kind of clients who don't want a quote old airplane, and sometimes old means just out of warranty, but sometimes means 15 years old. But I don't think the sales will be as good as they were in 19. But I think they'll still survive. And as we all said on this whole industry, we think there are too many aircraft models, or maybe one too many manufacturers, but there's too many models because, in most of the fields, there's very few. I think I forgot the exact number, but there's probably 9 out of the, 40 or 50 new airplanes, the models that are sold, that really take up the majority of the sales of new aircraft sales. So it's on, selling 4 or 5 airplanes of the model.
It's really interesting, though, because last week I did a list of models coming up, the ones that have been announced, and there's a lot less aircraft coming in the next few years than there was in any time between 2010 and 2020. So manufacturers aren't doing the new plane effect as much as they did then. Jay, do you want to? Any thoughts? Do you want to on Sharon's one about aircraft deliveries?
Well, I thought that was interesting what you just said, Al, where you made the list of airplanes. And I think one of the reasons the manufacturers probably aren't building as many new ones is they really did fill up all the holes, whether it was ultra long range, larger, smaller. And I think now they're probably going to just sit back and rest on the products that they built during those years and developed and introduced. I think that I think manufacturers have listen, when you're selling a pre-owned airplane and you're selling one that's fairly new, your biggest competition is always the manufacturer. On the other hand, the biggest competition to the manufacturer is the pre-owned market. And I think that there are opportunities in pre-owned purchase prices to not go to the manufacturer, but stick for a while with the pre-owned market as long as there's some inventory there. Now, admittedly, in certain categories like Gulfstream 550s and 450s, where the last several years of the 550 before it was abandoned went to in many cases special purpose airplanes. So those planes aren't a part of the main inventory to buy from. The 450 now is gone away. So there's a lot of product that because it's gone away and you can't get it as new, that on the other side of the coin are going to drive people back to the manufacturers. And the best thing the manufacturers, I think, can do is pay close attention to their production rates so that they don't create a disruption in their product and their desire to buy one.
Yeah, and it's remarkable how quickly they cut production last year. Okay.
That being said, Al, the values have really stabilized. So, from lenders or for people worried about, steep depreciation declines and things like that, I think a lot of the markets have really stabilized, and you're not seeing huge price drops.
Okay, Steve, stay on there. You've got a question from Janine at Paravion. Are you concerned that many of the tax incentives instituted by the last administration will be done away by the incoming one?
I think all of us agree, and we talked about this last time. I think this year you won't see that. I think that the administration just got their hands full on too many other issues. But I do think they're going to have to figure out how they're going to pay for a lot of this debt that they're taking on to recover from COVID. And they will next year you will see that depreciation allowance cut. My thoughts.
Okay. Jeff, question for you from Mike Carman at Carman Consulting. I'm sure you know Mike well from his time at CIT. So this phenomenon, fewer hours flown, more planes selling, are these just-in-case purchases? If so, what are the medium or longer-term implications of people buying just in case they need a plane? In terms of
the charter market, I think that these, on the charter side, I think there you're going to find, obviously, the family offices and advisors will always, the principals will buy the aeroplanes. Eventually, the aeroplane will sit there accumulating a whole lot of cost, and the family office will tell the principal to put the aeroplane onto a charter certificate, and eventually, let those new customers coming in be able to use those aeroplanes. So we have, as I said, our customers, with some of them who have done exactly that. And that is what has happened. They've asked now to go onto certificates so that they can try that when they're not using it.
Neil, do you have any thoughts on this?
I guess when I think about the demand side, I still think there's a huge opportunity for somebody to crack the code on what was, formerly the JetSmarter model, right? You're seeing it more and more. I've never seen more demand for it, like all of us, right? Any one of us who knows somebody that is not in aviation, you get the phone call, right? And there's so much demand right now for people looking to buy a seat on a private jet and not knowing how to be able to do so. And there's really, so I'm still waiting for that one market disruptor to emerge that can really, that sort of change the way we think about, sort of the masses flying leveraging business aviation. And so I think that's the biggest opportunity in front of us, for operators or for potentially a new entrant into the market.
I got the answer for you, Neil. Call me after this group chat.
Okay.
Investment opportunity, right?
What is the answer, Steve?
Neil, call me after the meeting.
I don't think you're seeing how this is meant to work. Question from Aoife O'Sullivan. Jay, you can have this one. Do you see banks and leasing companies who have been burnt by lack of payment during COVID pulling out of the market and having a negative impact on sales this year? Are you worried there's going to be a shortage of finance?
Maybe I'm naive. I haven't seen that kind of disruption on the lending side that maybe you're asking about. So I still see lenders being pretty excited about opportunities to loan on airplanes. And I think that I just haven't seen that kind of disruption. Sorry.
Neil, you're nodding?
Yeah, I was going to say we haven't run into that. We haven't run into that either, where operators are struggling to find financing, and there's so few places where you can get yield today. I think it's probably it still should be somewhat attractive for a lot of lenders.
Okay, Steve. Question from Mike Carmen again. Do you think some of the work that's been done this year with things like virtual pre-buys, buyers looking at aircraft via FaceTime, are here to stay?
No, I think that it's very disturbing to buyers, and that they can't get into a facility to oversee a pre-buy, or can't, really be in the face of the worker bees on the floor. I think if they get a chance to get back in there, they will, and because also, these have become huge profit centers, these maintenance facilities, and you just don't have as much control over the charges you're getting by remote control.
Jay, thoughts?
Well, it's complicated, and I don't think anybody likes the disjointed feeling of not being able to be there and put real eyes on real issues. So I think it'll go back. I don't think that this is a wave of the future or anything that's even close.
Okay. Jeff, you like the airliner market. Are you seeing airliners being bought from airlines and transformed into corporate jets in the US or around the world? This is a question from Sylvie Perron at Ultimate Jet magazine.
Not something that I've really heard about or seen. I mean, I must say that we haven't had as many requests in the last year as we had for ACJ, BBJ style trips. They typically were, Globals, G650s, and therefore a lot of that used to be driven by the Middle East, and particularly from Saudi Arabia. And then, of course, you had MBS come in and turn things on its head. Plus, Saudi Arabia's only opening up at the end of March was the news I heard last week. So there was a lot of capacity, there was a lot of spare capacity on the market in that category. And of course, over the festive period, we did do a trip on an A320, the Acropolis aircraft, and so forth, but it certainly was not where it was before. It was really more on the ultra long range cabins.
Steve, thoughts on this? Large aircraft. Also, Stephen Kelly at Global AVX, the aviation auction company, has said, could new startup commercial airlines offering first class plus service be a threat to business aviation demand?
Well, answering the last question first, that's not really our world, but I do think that people have tried that so many times in the past, and it hasn't worked. I mean, there's this new company, Aero, that's flying around Europe now, that's taken an Embraer, and they've made it into, I think, 18 seats. And the seats, it's actually pretty cheap, anywhere from 700 to 1,000 euros for a seat. And they're flying to the summer hotspots, the Ibiza, the south of France, the Mykonos, London kind of thing. And they are full, but it's one airplane. It's not going to change the way you travel. And commercial airlines, and there's so many airplanes sitting on the ground right now, commercial airplanes. It's tempting to say I could buy one cheap and make it into a VIP airplane. but the price of making it into a VIP airplane is so much more than buying the airplane. It just doesn't make economical sense.
Aero's Travis Kalanick, isn't the founder of Uber? Is behind that, isn't he?
Yeah, he's one of the big partners, yeah.
Okay, question from Byron Severson, CEO of Tally Ho Apps. Is there room in the market for a third ultra-long-range aircraft, brackets, Dassault?
No.
Jay?
I don't think so. I'm still struggling to see how they do with the ones that are out there. So I don't think so.
I mean, I'm not picking on Falcon. I'm just saying there are just, right now, just so many models that are out there for that stratosphere of a buyer. And as you get 5 and 10 years old, there's so many choices that, it's really a thin layer. And if you have to recover that kind of R&D cost, things will be difficult.
Right. Okay, there's a comment from Derek Bloom in response to Aoife O'Sullivan from the Air Law Firm's article. Derek's from Atlantic Aviation Service, saying he's worked on a couple multi-year lease extensions in which lessees were able to attain lower lease payments and term extensions because lessors' costs have come down with low prevailing rates, which is interesting. Another question from Johnny Christmas at Airbus. Yeah. Jeff, this is your question. Any more concentration amongst operators or charter companies in 2021?
Oh, I think that's going to happen. I couldn't predict who.
Go on.
Sorry?
Go on, let's predict who.
No. I wouldn't do that. But I can imagine so because, again, as it comes to that point, it's going to be about survivability over the winter period. There's some great operators out there who just can't fly. And we know, obviously, we're finding it now when we're using some of our preferred UK operators as an example. They have to get cabotage. It's cabotage now to fly within Europe internally, and so forth. And that's going to take a bit of getting used to, and I think it could change the dynamic for a few operators and brokers as well. So I do see mergers and acquisitions sort of continuing to go through, as there are throughout the business world anyway. There's a lot of money out there.
Yeah, I agree.
Neil, comments? You have a lot of operator customers.
In terms of new entrants and more competition?
Or merger and acquisitions, maybe.
Well, I mean, from where I sit, we've seen quite a bit of consolidation here in the U.S. I mean, you just point to two operators in, VistaJet with their acquisition of Exo, their recent acquisition of a Citation Ultra operator out of Wisconsin. Wheels Up with the announcement of Mountain on top of all their other acquisitions. I think you're going to continue to see consolidation from some of the larger players who are looking to really try and vertically integrate across every cabin class. So I think we'll see that trend continue, especially as some of the smaller operators simply can't compete.
Okay, another question for you from Clay, VP of Sales at FlexJet. Would you anticipate more of a migration to fractional ownership from whole aircraft ownership, or vice versa?
It's really interesting. What we've been seeing is sort of everybody stepping up, right? I feel like we've seen a lot of the jet card guys stepping up to fractional, the fractional guys stepping up to aircraft ownership. And so I think the one thing that this pandemic has created was a huge demand for business aviation, a huge number of new entrants into the marketplace, and so people are sort of stepping up the ladder. There's a lot of people skipping steps, but we continue to see new card guys, then the card guys going up to fractional and so on. So I think we'll see that trend continue.
Mm-hmm.
And a question from Luke W., professional aviator tech journalist. With lower annual hours, how are customers finding turnarounds and reliability of their airframes? Neil.
Look, I don't know. I think if you're operating a fleet of Citation 10s, you're gonna continue to have some reliability issues. I think a lot of it's really being driven off of the make and model of the aircraft. We haven't seen, for example, we look at scheduled costs and unscheduled cost, and we haven't seen our unscheduled maintenance costs drop significantly. Over the last 9 months, we've continued to see it stay in proportion to the number of flight hours.
Okay, great. Jay, question, another one from Luke. How do you see future supersonic business aircraft being received/perceived by customers, policymakers, government, and the public?
Oh, that's such a big question to unpack. Wouldn't it be exciting? But I'm not really seeing, and Steve talked about it a minute ago, when you look at some of the costs and the thin layer of available buyers for some of these ultra long-range planes, and then you provide the multiplier of what it would cost for the supersonic planes. I don't know how many buyers there are in the world for that plane. In terms of, regulatory side of it, and it flying over land and then getting all its permitting for that, I think that's probably something that I'm sure in parallel part is going down the path as they develop these airplanes. I just don't know that I see that being a big segment of our market. Steve, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a few guys, running for that space. I think when it gets closer to a reality, there will be buyers out for that kind of an airplane. I do think that, it's got to be a clean out, and it's going to be, VHS or beta kind of choice. Who's going to be a winner? I don't think there's room for 2 or 3 players, even though they're out there in the tracks trying to race for that space. But if there's, one ultimate guy out there, and they can leverage that airplane, that technology, to make a little bit of a bigger airplane, to make it a little bit more commercially usable, then I do think there'll be enough of a demand to support that kind of an airplane.
So you're not worried that
if it gets a commercial use, not an individual use.
Yeah, but there'll be a hybrid. I'm not talking about a Concorde-size airplane. Maybe a commuter-size kind of thing that you can actually sell seats on. I mean, Ken Rickey, I think, in FlexJet, they put an order in, an option on a lot of Aerions, and I think that they see that possibility of joining forces between people to be able to have enough demand for that kind of an airplane. So I do think that if there's a way to get more seats filled in a commercial kind of airplane, but I'm not talking about 100 seats. I'm talking about 20. I think you will see enough of a demand to support the technology and the R&D to build that airplane and a mini version, which would be a corporate airplane.
Jeff, thoughts?
I think customers, it's like some things, it becomes a bit of a novelty at some point, and the key factor there will always be, certainly from our side of the business, is cost. What is it going to cost to fly per hour, to charter it out, and the necessity thereof. And I think also in some of the other sort of sides of this is during 2020, sustainability seemed to sort of fall away while people were looking more into survival mode. And sustainability has become quite a big topic again. Obviously, with NetJets ramping that up as well, VistaJet and Signature and so forth. So, you're going to have two sides there on fighting the green parade as well, and also then on the cost of chartering and owning. And we put it this way, we haven't been asked about it yet.
It's like Phil Bolt from Bolt Advisory, again, residual value broker, has said Greta will hate it. Neil?
You can see where Greta's philosophy got us.
Yeah.
Sorry, what are you blaming her for?
I'm not blaming her for anything, but be careful what you ask for. You got a lower world carbon footprint now, but what was the cost to get there?
You just asked for China to go to the rest of the world to go to war with China.
I didn't ask. I'm just telling you my forecast.
Neil, thoughts on Supersonic?
I come out where Steve is on this. I don't think there's going to be huge demand for an individual buying a $125 million jet with who knows what the operating costs look like. But I do see, you have some of the larger operators who can acquire, one or two and keep it filled for certain, mission specific type trips for people. So I think there will be that demand, but again, I don't know if there's going to be enough demand to justify the R&D to keep going.
Fabrizio Poli's just gone. His money's on it being a race between Boom and Aerion, with his bets on Boom. Although we need to watch Elon Musk roll out his rocket flights. More questions. Here's a nice one for you, Neil. Luke has said, given there are engine programs on new aircraft, what about potential for renewables, SAF fuel programs linked to tail numbers or fuel cards in light of increasing climate change policies?
100%. I think operators, individuals are looking for opportunities to offset their carbon footprint, and I think it presents an opportunity for all of us to begin looking at creative ways to bundle it into bundle it into the maintenance program, or bundle it into your flight hour, your hourly rate for flight hours. I do think there's a lot of demand and requests coming in for to reduce your own carbon emissions. And so, I know for one, we at JSSI are exploring a number of options actively to begin introducing, that through our marketplace.
There's another big launch coming as well in the next few weeks on green aviation. Question for Jay from Sharon McKenna. Will there be an acceleration for green new designs and acceleration for retiring aircraft that don't meet new green standards?
Oh, I hope so. I mean, I think that we've watched older generation airplanes actually continue to take on new lives over and over, well beyond what we really probably thought they would when we had ADS-B out, and when we had conversions that were going to be in some cases almost parallel to the cost of the airplane. But I think that we're going to get back to, not that we haven't been there, get back to the idea of green, get back to the idea of efficiency, get back to the idea of better footprints, carbon footprints. And I think that will begin to maybe finally move some of these 30-year-old airplanes off the grid.
Okay, great. Toby at Fly Victor says, seems there's always companies stepping up, e.g. charter to card to fraction. Maybe that's why it's better to stay on charter, which is something to annoy his competitors. Jeff, nice one for you. Johnny Christmas at Airbus Corporate Jets. Once the vaccine has come back, once the vaccine has arrived, are we going to see green BizAv bashing coming back?
I would like to. Well, no, I wouldn't like to see that happen, but I think it's going to, and I think people are looking at it now, and you always have that point of excess, right? If people look at it, now it's becoming essential travel. I mean, going to the Maldives is essential, we understand. But on the corporate side, it will be about getting business back, people back into business. There is, of course, the leisure sector. I imagine there would be some of that going on as people sort of swing over to looking at whether it's excessive or not, and how they deem that, whether it's in monetary value or an environmental value. So it already has started in some ways, and people are thinking about that. As I said, I know with NetJets and VistaJet and so forth, those are big operators, and it's clearly an item on the agenda. And we need to adapt our businesses to that.
Steve?
Well, I think with the Biden administration, climate control is going to be a huge, important issue and a huge push. And I think people will get, whatever shamed you want to call it, if you're not paying attention to it. But how much really they're going to do this year, I don't think much, because everybody's got so many other issues that they really need to attend to survive, or worried about other bigger problems. But I mean, they'll PR wise say they're into it and behind it, But over the next few years, the Biden administration is going to be huge behind climate control issues.
Okay, Jay, question for you from Jean-Noel, who, just in case anyone's interested, has a large cabin aircraft available. Why ultra-long range aircraft? Why are ultra-long range aircraft not as successful as expected? After all, they provide non-stop range, ... They have been pretty successful.
Yeah.
But Jay?
I think they have been successful. I think that we've forgotten the success because we've forgotten the demand over the last 10 months. And so it's taken some of that need to go those distances off the table. But I do think that they're successful.
Okay, Jay, you've been on the committee of NBAA. This is a horrible question from Paul Vanderblom. Not horrible because he's asking it, but it's a tough one for anyone who organises events. Will a real face-to-face e-base happen this year?
Oh, wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great? Don't I miss the opportunity to see my friends from different parts of the world and see them in different parts of the world? Whether or not it can be this year or whether it's going to be 2022, I think the distribution of the vaccine, I think that it's not about e-base and it's not about traveling to a trade show. I think it's simply going to be about the confidence to travel safely, and that's going to come from the distribution of the vaccine. And right now, I don't know, but I'd sure like to see you there for it.
Jeff?
As long as EB or e-base, I don't foresee it happening here. Everyone will save a lot of money, but let's all hope for Vegas, right? I'm definitely making the trip for that.
You'll be in Vegas no matter what.
No matter what, I'll get in the camel if I have to.
Any other business before we close?
What do you think, Al? I'd be curious to get your views on that. This is really your wheelhouse on will e-base happen.
I won't comment on e-base. I think, although Jeff moans about being in lockdown in Switzerland, he's allowed to meet 6 people. That's not lockdown.
5, hell.
We're allowed to go for a walk with someone in a park, one person. Although Steve's having long business meetings, dinner parties.
Business meetings, you're allowed to have more.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure you should have food served at them and drinks.
What's the difference? It's a business meeting.
I know we're hoping to run CGI Dubai in June, Singapore in September, and Miami in November, but who knows? Hopefully we can do that. We've got 2 more questions very quickly. Actually, the comments. Sylvie saying, see you in Vegas. And Luke saying, essential travel, the pre-2020 battle for equivalence of mental health with physical health seems to design since COVID. Physically seeing people is always good for both. So that's a nice comment. I think everyone is desperate to see everyone else face to face. Until then, thank you so much to Neil, Jeff, Jay, and Steve.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Happy New Year.